Run you through the front pages first of all. Now, there's one story dominating the headlines, as you can imagine, this morning. We've covered it on breakfast. This is in the Sunday Telegraph, and it's Brand accused of rape and sexual abuse. It's actually an original Sunday Times story, so on the front, accused Russell Brand, the sex predator who hid in plain sight. The Observer has a picture of Brand on the front, but they go with a different story. Labour wants new EU links in a reset of foreign policy. I'll be discussing that with Pat McFadden. On the front of the Mail on Sunday, again, the Brand story. Brand is accused of rape and grooming a girl of 16. Again, Sunday Express puts a picture of Brand on the front, but they go with millions ditch crisis hit NHS and go private. Sun on Sunday, for the tabloids, you'd imagine that they'd go with the same story, and they do. Russell Brand raped me is the simplicity of that headline, following on from the Channel 4 Dispatches documentary last night. And then in the Mirror, Brand accused of rape and sex assaults. Let's get straight into that story and others with our paper reviewer, Madeline Grant. She's my colleague at the Telegraph. She's a columnist and she's also the parliamentary sketch writer for the newspaper. Madeline, lovely to see you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, as we've just seen there, all of these headlines about Russell Brand, we're calling it toxic Brand. He's obviously professing his innocence, but these allegations are really very serious.
Yeah, they are, and it's been an extraordinary investigation by the Times and the Sunday Times and the Dispatches team at Channel 4. Painstaking research over a period of several years has given rise to, you know, some really harrowing accusations of rape, sexual assault and generally deeply predatory behaviour. And
we knew, I think, because he's been very honest about it, that he has had his demons in the past. He's had problems with drink and drug addiction. He's said himself that he's behaved extremely promiscuously.
Yeah.
But I think this raises questions, doesn't it, about his employers in the past. He's worked for the BBC, left unceremoniously after the incident with Jonathan Ross on Radio 2.
Yes.
He's also been working for Channel 4. I mean, some of the testimony here is disturbing in itself because it's talking about his treatment of women, but it's also sort of suggesting that the people that worked with him acted as sort of pseudo-pimps. Again,
Yes.
He denies these allegations, but don't some of these broadcasters now have questions to answer?
Yes, and in fact, you know, it is also being reported in the Telegraph and elsewhere that many of the media forums that Russell Brand did work for are now coming under pressure to look into their own history and talk about what they knew and when. And it's often a very common thing with someone who's very famous and charismatic that they, you know, and just their position often means that they can get away with behaviour that were, you know, a junior underling behaving in such
Yes.
a way they wouldn't last the week.
Yeah.
And often, you know, people concealing and assisting with this dodgy behaviour.
I mean, it'll run and run in this story, and let's just see how it unfolds in the coming days, because I'd imagine that the Times has also got a follow-up for tomorrow's paper. Let's get into politics, though. I've called this Starmer versus Sunak because, at last, we're getting a little bit of policy from the Labour leader.
Yes.
Been a bit scant in the past.
Yes.
He's sort of had sound bites over substance, but in particular of interest is, of course, his EU migrant plan. He's denying that he wants to be involved in the EU's own kind of quota system that they have internally with all of the member states. Bit of confusion around this policy, though.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's almost, I think he was taken aback by just how sort of viscerally many people reacted to it and in such a negative way. And he's now seeking to clarify his position. He keeps stressing that his plan would by no means mean taking more migrants than we currently do, but without explaining what about this deal would mean fewer migrants than before, especially given that we already paid France tens and hundreds of millions of pounds a year to do the same.
What's happened to that money? Nothing's changed.
Nothing,
Theresa May.
Nothing has changed. And the strategy so far has been one of deliberate vagueness and staying silent and basically not interrupting your enemy while he's making a mistake. But at some point he had to come out and offer policies, and they are not well thought through at all. And I think he's been, you know, extremely lucky that things have been so chaotic in the Tory camp that many of these bad proposals that would be electoral kryptonite, like you know, giving EU nationals the vote and 16-year-olds the vote.
Well, this 16-year-old's getting the vote is interesting because earlier in the week I remember reading stories saying he's not doing this.
Yes.
Now it seems he is doing it. He's been accused of gerrymandering, basically trying to fix the vote in his favour, because we know that most people 16 to 18 are left-leaning and not right-leaning.
Yes.
What do you make of it? Is he definitely going to do it?
Well, it's a bit of the old hokey-cokey, you know, it gets floated and then it's denied, and I think they're sort of testing the waters. But they do feel in a very powerful position now because things have been so chaotic that they can get away with proposing things that perhaps if they were dealing with a more coherent Tory party with who were more popular with voters, they wouldn't think of doing. But the 16-year-old thing is obvious gerrymandering, I think, for the simple reason that there is not one other area of public policy where Labour proposed giving more power to 16-year-olds. There's talk of them banning smoking to 18-year-olds and from then on, basically. So not treating 18-year-olds like adults.
The Labour Party is historically associated with sort of nanny state government, and at the same time, they're quite happy for 16-year-olds to have that electoral power.
This one issue, that's what they think.
It's funny that, I can't think why. Having said that, we've got Rishi Sunak vowing, well, according to The Sun anyway, The Sun on Sunday, of becoming action man, a man of action. Are we finally going to get some policies from him? Well, not necessarily, say the Mail on Sunday, because there's now infighting over Number 10's plan to axe inheritance tax.
Yes, although I was in the chamber on Wednesday when Starmer first used the inaction man line, and the Labour MPs all, laughed as if he'd...
It's quite a good line.
It is a good line. It's certainly by the standards of Parliament right now, it's a good line. But I think it did tap into something there, which is that, despite having a sizable majority, the PM either dithers on policies. Currently they're deciding whether or not to continue with HS2 so it goes to London Euston or not.
The trans guidance, what's happened to that?
The trans guidance has been delayed, and of course the nutrient neutrality thing they couldn't get through because Labour opposed it in the Lords. So
Michael Gove had a go at them about that today in the Telegraph.
He has indeed, and it seems that despite having this majority, in practice the story is one of apathy and kind of stasis, really,
and indecision.
Exactly.
Let's move on to women being erased again. How many stories like this do we need to see? Now we've got the GMC, according to the Sunday Telegraph, removing the word mother from all staff maternity guidance. Meanwhile, in the Mail on Sunday, women's health writer censored on Always website for saying females have periods. Make it stop.
I know.
Madeline, please make it stop. What's happened?
I wish I could. I mean, we really are in cloud cuckoo land, aren't we? If a writer on women's health who is writing on the website of a company that sells sanitary towels can't use the word woman or period.
Why is it men are never erased?
Yes, I always wonder this. Why is it always? I think it's because that there's that same testosterone exists. I never hear of any trans men, so biological females, demanding to erase the existence of men from the language. And also we saw as another story, we haven't got the cutting, but there was a story about how the BBC had been quite happy to include this group that had basically said death to all TERFs. Like it's perfectly acceptable to be very violent and incite violence against people who just question the use of puberty blockers and other things. But of course these people can just do what they like. I think it's what I find really quite extraordinary is how consistently it's platforms such as the BBC that give a voice to the most extreme voices within this lobbying group. Whereas actually, I'm sure most trans people don't mind the word woman being used. They just want to live their life.
I know, they're appalled by the kind of balaclava-wearing brigade that tries to force professors out of universities.
Precisely.
A quick final word on this whole killer dog crisis. So The Sun has managed to track down the owner and breeder of Killer Kimbo, which the Telegraph found in the week was responsible for the breeding of probably half of the XL bullies in this country. We've just had another death at the weekend, so I think the number of deaths linked to these dogs is now 12. I suppose the question, Madeline, is should we cull these dogs now? Because somebody's made the point, look, the puppies now could grow up to be killers later. It's all very well having this ban, but what happens in the intervening decade?
It's a very good point. I mean, I suspect that Britain is a country so enamoured of dogs, all dogs, including ones that are called things like Killer Kimbo and a breed responsible for the deaths and also maiming of countless children, other dogs.
These dogs are meant to be placid. I mean, Killer Kimbo, XL Bully, the clue might be in the name. Yes, although I just think Britain is such a dog-loving country that I think any talk of a cull of these animals, however violent, would probably be met with, mass protest and widespread disapproval. Yeah. Well, they say blame the deed, not the breed, but then it's an oxymoronic argument because you then say, OK, well, if owners are responsible, make them have dog licences. Yes, exactly. I'll be putting this to some of my guests a bit later. Madeline Grant, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you very much for doing the paper review.